selected parts from the book My Life Story, written by Shri KJS Dhillon. Part 11. The quote, "The army marches on its stomach," which is attributed to both Napoleon Bonaparte and Frederick the Great, is a very apt recognition of the importance of integrating sound logistics in any pragmatic operational plans. It is also relevant here to invoke the play Arms and the Man by the renowned writer George Bernard Shaw, in which the battle hardened soldier Captain Bluntschill preferred to carry chocolates in his pouch instead of additional ammunition. The cultivation of survival skills to deal with the non availability of proper food and living off the land are the mainstays of a soldier's day to day life, especially during the prolonged operations in remote areas devoid of any habitat. The anecdotes in this chapter and some of the subsequent ones highlight this integral aspect of a soldier's life. The Indian Army has training teams operating in various countries outside India, and one such team functions out of Bhutan. I was posted in the Indian Military Training Team IMTRAT Bhutan in 1995 to 97 as a major. The incident I narrate here relates to a quiet Sunday afternoon in the January 1996 when we were indulging in a passionate game of cricket which was slated to be followed by brunch. Unfortunately, the vivacity of our game was marred by a human frailty as one of the Bhutanese soldiers posted at a forward location fell ill and needed to be evacuated on an emergency basis. Ironically, this human emergency coalesced into another practical exigency as the Indian Army helicopter that had been flown in from across the border to undertake the casualty evacuation could not carry the ailing soldier because the weather in the high altitude area had packed up. The term weather packing up in the mountains typically implies a rapid decline in visibility due to expanding cloud cover, which usually happens in high altitude areas after midday. In view of the deteriorating weather conditions, the helicopter pilots were forced to abort the rescue mission and decided to return to their base after refueling at our location. On their way back, the radio detachment at a particular location in South Bhutan urged them to land there, warning that the weather ahead was getting progressively worse. With a view to hitting the plains of Hasimara, a small town situated on the bank of river Torsha in Alipurduar district of West Bengal near the border with Bhutan. The pilots persisted on their sortie as they were keen to returning to their base before nightfall. However, they soon realized the futility of their overambitious goal, and with the visibility falling to near zero, precluding any chance of a safe landing even at Hasimara, the pilots had to return to the location where the radio detachment had told them to land. In the meantime, the weather in that area too had packed up. Suddenly, therefore, the helicopter went off the radar and lost all communication with the ground. When this bit of news and details of the sequence of events leading to the aborted landing of the sortie reached us in Indian Military Training Center, we feared the worst. However, after all the attempts to re-establish contact with the missing helicopter failed, I got a call from a senior that I, along with another officer, a medical officer, and a few Jawans, had to immediately launch a search and rescue mission. I assembled my team and drove down during the wee hours of the night to the place where the last transmission with the pilots had taken place. On reaching the designated site, we contacted the radio operator and checked the telelog or telecommunication log, which clearly indicated the time when the transmission had been made and the replies received from the pilots. With the weather continuing to play truant, the proposed rescue sortie could not be undertaken to search for the missing helicopter. Not wanting to waste any more time in waiting for the weather to clear up, we met the Jongda, the local botanist official who in Bhutan performs the role equivalent to that of a divisional commissioner or the head of an area and is the senior-most government official in a designated area. The Jongda handed us a letter which was tantamount to being the decree of the king, clearly stating that any help whatsoever we sought from anyone we came across during our rescue operation could not be refused. Just after initiating the operation, the first hurdle our small team faced was the lack of any detailed maps of that area, and much as we tried, the only maps we could get hold of were some basic tourist maps that were of hardly any help in the hostile terrain and weather conditions. The situation was further compounded by the fact that the area had virtually no military presence per se, but an extensive presence of members of the insurgent organization, the United Liberation Front of Assam, ULFA. Exercising extreme caution, we commenced our search, simultaneously probing the villagers to assess if they had recently seen or heard a helicopter flying or landing in the area. We got a faint but clear lead on the third day of our search operation when the pilot of a foreign commercial airliner flying over the specific area intercepted a FREC transmission which he reported along with the rough coordinates of the likely transmission site to the Air Traffic Control ATC at Hasimara Airfield of the Indian Air Force. This provided us with a rough idea of the location of the stranded helicopter and also the heartening indication that the communication system of the helicopter was at least intact enough to send out a transmission, which also suggested that the chopper was probably not damaged and the pilots sending out the transmission were presumably safe. However, the weather gods continued to be unkind, precluding any scope of an aerial search. But now, with a firm lead to set us on our way and also using the services of some botanist guides who were well versed in both the local language and the local topography, the team located the stranded helicopter after about 4 days. By this time, additional choppers of the Indian Army had also come in to assist us in the search and rescue by aerial means. The next challenge was to find the pilots because when the rescue team reached the helicopter, it was found empty, lying deserted in the middle of a heavy snowstorm and extremely chilly conditions. In an effort to recreate the sequence of events, it was surmised that when the airborne pilots were unable to combat the weather, they decided to make the best of an impossible situation and started looking around for a flatfish area large enough to facilitate the landing of the chopper. We later learned that they saw a hilltop above the clouds and the undulating ground entirely covered by the snow, showing aviation skills of an extraordinary order. The pilots successfully landed the helicopter on that stretch of snow above the clouds and then just waited for the weather to clear enough for them to exit the helicopter. However, staying put in the chopper was not an option due to the unrelenting chilly breeze on the hilltop, and they were compelled to leave the helicopter to look for a warmer haven, which they found in a little grazier's hut a few meters down the slope. After shelter, the next priority was procuring food as all the emergency rations in the helicopter had been consumed, and thereafter the pilots only had snow for succor. So they would melt a little bit of snow as they did not want to come out of the hut into the cold. On reaching the location of the hut, the rescue party could barely see a few meters ahead of them as even the footsteps were covered with fresh snow. But plodding on with the effort, the team eventually managed to enter the hut and finally saw the two pilots huddled inside, shaking and shivering, but alive and relatively unharmed. Although a helicopter with the mechanic had reached there as part of the rescue effort, which was used to evacuate the pilots, the stranded one flew off as a single pilot helicopter with a mechanic on board who had checked all the functional parts of the stranded helicopter before taking off. The pilots were straightaway ferried to a hospital at Hasimara where they were subjected to a thorough medical checkup and pronounced hale and hearty, though a little weak due to near starvation and the overall trauma caused by the situation. But wait a minute. This was still not the end of the adventure, as before the search party could be evacuated, the weather packed up again, and the rescue team was left high and dry in the freezing cold. Fortunately, the team had a little bit of dry rations and, while climbing up the hill, had come across some orange orchards and bought some oranges from the caretaker there. Although even those oranges were now frozen and had to be thawed before they could be consumed. This challenge too met with match in the typical Fauji ingenious minds. The boys would literally break the frozen oranges into segments and hold it in their mouth till it became chewable. Meanwhile, the team decided to wait for the rescue helicopters instead of descending from the slope on foot, as the biggest challenge, however, was that if the rescue helicopter arrived after the weather opened up, it would not be able to locate the team in the difficult terrain. And even if it were able to spot the team, there may not have been a suitable place for it to land. So, in the face of this Hobson's choice, in the snowy ordeal, before the team finally commenced walking, the helicopters were able to land and evacuate the team just in time, as they say, for this search and rescue operation in the snow and the perilous terrain. I, along with some other members of the rescue team, was awarded the Chief of the Army Staff's Commendation Card. I can proudly say that this was my first decoration as a soldier. When we reunited with the pilots of the earlier failed sortie, they entertained us with their anecdotal experiences. They told us that when they had landed on the hilltop, the noise of the helicopter had attracted a local grazier boy who came to investigate what had disturbed the peace in that deafening, quiet, and serene location. Assuming that he would bring them some assistance and perceiving that he was somewhat educated, they tried to communicate with him. Though their inability to speak the Bhutanese language was a major hindrance. However, they still managed to get their message across him, or so they thought, and in an effort to seal the deal, one of the pilots handed him rupees 500 and his Ray-Ban aviator sunglasses, asking him to return with some help. The pilot thought that this would incentivize the boy to bring them aid, but it probably worked as a disincentive instead, because the boy never came back, perhaps fearing that he would have to return the money and goggles. Later, when we reminisced over this incident, we realized in hindsight that perhaps the pilots should have just shown him the money, dangling it as an enticement to be won only if he returned with help. A great lesson in human resources management, that is, incentives should be offered only on completion of the assigned task. Learning in the army is not restricted only to reading the précis or pamphlets taught in the courses of instruction. As they say, there is no age limit to learn, and I learned how or how not to behave as a divisional or course commander when I was still a captain. This incident took place when I was posted as a captain at the Infantry School Mahou, and Lieutenant General D.D. Saklani, a thorough gentleman and a great professional, was the commandant. He somehow had a personal liking for me as an instructor. He would invariably walk in to inspect the classroom activity whenever I was taking a class, just to keep an eye on the proceedings, and I suspect also to ensure that young instructors were doing their job properly. Subsequently, after completion of my tenure at Mahou, I got posted to Samba in Jammu and Kashmir, a very small place but of immense strategic importance, while Lieutenant General D.D. Saklani was appointed as an advisor to the Governor of Jammu and Kashmir. One day, He was slated to visit Samba for a civil administration function but was to land at the army helipad, and I was instructed to receive him at the helipad and offer him a cup of tea. The evening before his scheduled arrival, we received the information that General Saklani has a special affinity for crackjack biscuits, so a packet of these biscuits should be arranged at any cost as an accompaniment to the general's tea. I told the mess havaldar to procure the biscuits, but a while later he came to inform me that the biscuits were not available in the mess and there was no stock even in the unit or the brigade headquarters CSD canteen. The elusive biscuits could not even be found in the small local market of Samba, and we were at a loss as to how to fulfill the instructions of serving only that particular brand of biscuits. Finally, it was decided to send someone to get the biscuits from Jammu, which was about an hour and a half drive from Samba. As an anticlimax, General Saklani's first comment when the biscuits were offered to him was, Tiny, has the CSD stopped stocking all other biscuit brands except Crackjack these days? Determined to get to the bottom of this hoax, I told him that we had specific instructions that he preferred only Crackjack biscuits, which is why we had made sure that they were served to him. Shaking his head in mirth, he said, I don't remember when and where, but perhaps I had been served these biscuits in some unit a long time back, and as an aside, commented that these biscuits were quite delicious. His comment had been taken too seriously, and since then he was being offered nothing but this brand of biscuits wherever he went for an official visit. He also said that after this revelation to me, he was certain that his word would again be noted for eternity, and henceforth he would be offered all other brands except Crackjack during his subsequent visits to any unit. After this rather unexpected conversation, I did not have the heart to apprise him of the sweet and salty tale of the packet of Crackjack biscuits that had traversed to our unit all the way from Jammu. Unique indeed are the ways of the Indian Army. This particular incident stayed with me, and I gave clear instructions to my staff as divisional commander and subsequently as a course commander that no food choice or habits would ever be told to the units under my command, because a small instruction like this can mean unnecessary wastage of time, energy, and resources at the unit end. I would much rather be like the course commander who had visited us in Sikkim and enjoyed the chicken sandwich offered by the unit as per their choice of menu and the availability of ingredients at their location. While on the topic of food or the lack of it, I must also point out that whenever we undertook an operation in the army, we always carried survival rations such as good, that is jaggery, and shakar paras, a sweet fried snack made of wheat flour. Also, since Rajputana Rifles troops are basically Jats and Rajputs, they prefer wholesome homemade stuff to pep up their energy, such as pinnis, churma, and puris, in addition to shakarparas, which are packed and carried on long range patrols. I suppose in most of the regiments they still prefer traditional food, because when I was undergoing jungle training with a battalion of the Bihar regiment, Litti choka was very popular. I really relished this dish each time they served it to me. Its popularity among the soldiers from Bihar, in fact, compares with that of dal bati churma served in Rajputan rifles. In recent times, however, the popularity of some of the traditional foods has been waning as many soldiers are now veering towards instant snacks like Maggie and chocolates, which may not be ideal nutrition options. In the army, we also rely on meals ready to eat, which are like packaged pre cooked food. The contents of these MRE packets have to be just immersed in hot water, ending up becoming proper meals, including pulao, dal, sabji, upma, and halwa, with the halwa being an all time favorite of Rajputan soldiers. They also cannot do without rotis, and no meal in Rajputan rifles is complete without rotis, as wheat is part of the staple diet in Rajasthan and all of North India. An anecdote regarding the sweet tooth of the Rajputan rifle soldier and how the sugar is ingeniously saved from consumption as a snack in the jungles of Manipur is narrated in a subsequent chapter. We can thus say that the soldier is not only a superman but also human who has normal likes and dislikes, small eccentricities and pleasures. Outside, he is very tough and always ready for a fight, but inside, he longs for the small joys of family life, of good food and his favorite dishes, and of joyful interactions with peers and seniors. The name Rajwar presents a very small valley close to the line of control, consisting of a few small hamlets encircled on all sides by dense jungles adjacent to the Bungus Valley, famous for its natural beauty and sprawling grazing pastures. The forested bowl with a small valley floor has only one narrow entry and exit towards the small town of Handwara in North Kashmir that connects it with the outside world. This area experiences heavy snowfall and was also so isolated from the outside world in the earlier days that a local landlord used to look after all the day to day issues of the populace. He was respectfully addressed as Rajaji, and his descendants still reside in a very aesthetically built double storied wooden house in Jachaldhar village within the Rajwar Bowl. As a brigadier, I was the RR sector commander and the Rajwar forest, notorious for nurturing hideouts of foreign terrorists due to its harsh topography and proximity to the line of control, fell within my area of responsibility. As the RR sector commander, I avoided being dined in or dined out in a traditional manner, that is, from the officers' mess of any of the RR units under my command. In fact, I preferred to be lunched out from the rifle company deployed in the most terrorist infested areas and spend some later moments with the Jawans. During one such lunching out after a very successful operation in the remotest company post in Rajwar, everyone was offered crispy, finger licking fried chicken snacks that looked and tasted similar to the dish associated with Kentucky Fried Chicken, the world famous food chain. When asked about it, the cook just smiled and said that it was KFC chicken and refused to disclose the secret recipe in public. After my tenure in RR, I was posted to a peace station and had the luxury of spending some leisure time with my family in a more relaxed environment. I have had a fascination for cooking since my NDA days and like to experiment with new recipes whenever I get the opportunity. On one such evening, as I remembered the delectable snacks I was smitten with a desire to replicate them, but the first hurdle was my complete lack of knowledge of the recipe. So I called up the company commander of that post, who told me that the particular cook who had rustled up the memorable dish in Rajwar was on leave in South India, and no one else in the company knew the recipe. Undeterred by this next hurdle, I took the contact number of the cook and called up with the hope that he would agree to share the recipe with me. And sure enough, the generous cook informed me of all the unique ingredients that went into the delicious dish. I will also take the liberty of sharing this recipe with my readers with the sole aim of emphasizing the ingenuity and creativity of our soldiers even under adverse weather, terrain, and operational conditions. The secret recipe involved drumsticks in a whipped paste of corn flour and crushed cornflakes, followed by frying of the marinade contents. The key ingredients is crushed cornflakes, which make it such a magical dish. Apart from the importance of food for sustenance, I would also like to list here certain tips for survival in the army. One of the key means of survival at high altitude is recourse to fresh snow, which is absolutely pure and clear at the height and completely free of any pollution. The only pollution that may be witnessed in high altitude army posts is around the barracks where we stay, maybe in the vicinity of cookhouse or the areas where we undertake our training. Also, since most of the army pickets are on hilltop, they can benefit from the water springs that spout out of cracks somewhere around the midriff region of the mountain. In the olden days, this water from the springs was usually lugged up to the post in a knapsack on the back. However, these days pipelines have been laid at most of the places, which need to be maintained well, especially during winter as they burst due to the water freezing in them. Most of the provisions are carried uphill to the army posts by porters and ponies, which may be both army ponies as well as civilian ponies. While ponies are used for heavier luggage like ammunition and rations, water and other lighter equipments are invariably carried by locally employed civilian porters who are an integral part of the body of troops deployed on a particular post, generally stay in nearby villages and earn their livelihood working with the army units. During a snowfall, however, the services of the porters are normally discontinued to protect them from the risk of avalanches, and as mentioned earlier, the fresh snow is melted and used instead to source water that is used for drinking as well as for cooking and even bathing. In areas that receive plenty of rains but otherwise suffer from potable water scarcity, rainwater harvesting is a viable option for sourcing water for daily needs. For instance, when I was posted in the Rashtriya Rifles in Manipur, which receives extensive rainfall during the year, the roofs of the houses were built with slanting tin sheets from which the rainwater cascades and was collected in containers like drums or buckets. Moreover, since bamboo is commonly available in the northeast, we use it to chisel bamboo sticks and tie them along the complete length of the tin roofs to create long pipes for transferring the rainwater from the roofs into the storage vessels below. This water would then be boiled to decontaminate it and make it fit for drinking and cooking. A water sterilizing kit is also provided to decontaminate the water, where boiling it may not be feasible, especially when on a long range patrol. This kit basically has two tablets, one blue and other white, which have to be added to the water bottle one after the other in a specified sequence with a specific interval of time in between the two immersions. I used to always get confused as to which tablet, blue or white, has to be added first till I made a code for myself. My code was water bottle, meaning white tablet to be followed by the blue one corresponding with the initials W and B for water bottle. These survival tips and drills are an integral part of army life across the country, with the peculiarities of each region being mapped into the specific requirements of army life in that particular region. Acknowledging the importance of survival on a daily basis with little external support, I too, like all the Faujis, have honed my survival acumen and learnt various skills, especially in cooking. I am, in fact, very proud of the absolutely round rotis that I can make. I can also cook both non vegetarian and vegetarian food as well as desserts. Cooking is a key skill as trained cooks are available only in the posts, and when we move out for operations in small teams, each team cannot be assigned an independent cook and someone from within the team has to be able to cook. Also, when these teams are out in the field, all members are considered equal and there are no hierarchical divisions among them. Each member, be they jawans or officers, is expected to perform all routine chores and share responsibilities across the board, starting from cooking to performing guard duty. This is how we build bonds for life in the army and also justify the famous phrase band of brothers. Another anecdote that has to do with food concerns the wife of one of my colleagues, Captain Bala Nair, who also got married around the same time as me. His wife is an army officer's daughter. When they set up their home a few days after their marriage, they invited the commanding officer, Colonel Tribhunesh Mukherjee, and since we were also newly married, Captain Nair invited us to for a really lavish meal at their place. Post dinner, the lady, who was naturally very excited and enthusiastic about the party, straight away asked commanding officer, Colonel Mukherjee, how was the food? And since we were in Udaipur, Rajasthan, our hosts had served the special local cuisine. Colonel Mukherjee's response to the lady's question was as candid as her question. He said, Gatte ki sabji was very nice, but for the other dishes, you need a little more practice. This virtually reduced the lady to tears. She said, ये तो बाला बाहर से लेकर आया है, बाकी तो मैंने खुद बनाया था. It was the only dish Bala brought from outside. All the rest were cooked by me. Notwithstanding, Mrs. Bala Nair is an excellent cook today, and the Nairs are wonderful hosts. The commanding officer in any army unit is a father figure, and he has all the right to politely or even sternly convey his appreciation or otherwise to anyone, as every statement uttered by him is literally like a law in that unit. Albeit, the commanding officer in a unit is not an appointment but an institution who would always call a spade and never mince his words. Thanks for listening.